Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wonderful people. My name is Benjamin, welcome to my book club, and today we're talking about a book that I picked up thanks to Bingo. If you don't know, I am doing the R-Fantasy subreddit's Bingo contest this year. Here is the board. It is a set of 25 writing prompts with the idea of getting you to come out of your shell, read things you may not read otherwise, and it's been so much fun so far. I am up to the square judging a book by its cover. This square asks you to read a book that you bought entirely because of what the cover looked like. And the hard mode says you can't even read the blurb first. So you can't read reviews, you can't talk to people about the book, you just see a cover you really like, you don't even flip it over, and then you read it, which is, for me, terrifying. I usually know so much about a book before I pick it up. I feel like, even though I read lots of books, I know that the amount of books I read in my life is a limited number. And I don't want to waste some of that number on books I don't think I'll like. And so I often look at Goodreads, reviews, other books the author may have done that I know about. I'll read the blurb, I might check subreddit. I'll especially look for reviews from people that I know and trust, whose opinion that I share. But it would be a shame to fail the bingo contest right near the end like this. This is one of the last few squares I needed, so I went to the bookshop. And I came up with two options. The first of which was Priory of the Orange Tree, and the other one of which was The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi. Both of which have just gorgeous covers that are just amazing. And I went with The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi for one very easy reason. Priory of the Orange Tree was about 7 million pages long, and this was a normal-sized book. So, Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. Based on this cover, I was really hoping for, seafaring, krakens. It had a piratey feel to me with the adventures. I was hoping for some sort of high seas, pirate, fantasy sort of novel, and I wasn't disappointed. The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi are set on the Indian Ocean, in a part of the world where I don't see many books being set, and so that was super interesting. Amina herself is a retired pirate. She was once a scourge of the high seas. She was once a very famous pirate, the sort that merchants would talk about in bars and be worried about and scared of. But now she's settled down with her mother and her young daughter in a small, fairly dilapidated house, just living a meager existence with her family. She's put that life of piracy, that life of supernatural things, of several strings of husbands and ex-husbands behind, until that is a wealthy lady appears, claiming to be the mother of a member of her old crew, a crew member whose death Amina clearly blames herself for and has unresolved guilt feelings over, and asks to hire Amina for one last job to go and try and retrieve this crew member's daughter who's been kidnapped. We then get just a great adventure story as Amina tracks down the Frank, which is the word they use for just any like Western European, like Crusader sort of person. We are in that sort of era of Crusades and Jerusalem and all that sort of stuff. So while tracking him down, Amina gets the old crew back together, and it is really one of those sort of getting the group back together for one last job sort of books, and it was really enjoyable. So let's just start off with the things that I really liked. First off, the characters. For the most part, the characters are very good, but the character that really shines is our titular character, Amina Al-Sirafi. She is just wonderful. It's really a breath of fresh air, or a breath of sea air, to have a really nice, strong female lead who's also not that sort of average mid-20s or teenager sort of age that we normally see. We have a grown woman with a wealth of experience behind her back, dealing with, having lived this adventurous lifestyle and now being thrust back into it, with the effects of age, with the knowledge she has, with the responsibilities she now has as a much more level-headed person than we often see in protagonists. Amina is pulled in all these different directions. Her want to be back home with her family, her want to protect her daughter, her want to be back with her mother, her want to be back with her crew that she's just found again, the desire to be back on the ocean, to be doing the piracy stuff that she loves so much, her wish to be a devout Muslim now. She's led a life of a lot of hedonistic sin, but now regrets some of that and wants to be a proper good Muslim. Meanwhile, she has to deal with this history that she's given herself. She did do these things, and she now has to handle that. And it's just really interesting, all the different directions she gets pulled and how she deals with them. And seeing the world through her eyes in this, with her as our focus character, gives us a lot of insight into things that a younger, less experienced character may not know, and then helps and that helps evolve the world for us as the reader. Speaking of which, the next thing I love is the world and the world building. It is just beautifully done. Set in the Indian Ocean, this book just drips culture and world building. It's set in the area where modern day would be Oman, Iran, Somalia, Pakistan, India, that sort of area. And it is just so full of Middle Eastern, Northern African, Indian, all that lovely different cultures all mingling together in the book. And I feel like, obviously I can't talk to how valid and how realistic they feel, but it comes across as very genuine. It comes across in a very positive manner, and it comes across as very well researched and very respectful of the cultures involved. And it left me wanting more stories, to read more folk stories from that sort of area, to read more adventure novels, to read sci-fi written in that sort of area. I'd love to know more about this area of the world. Whereas, you know, most books are very European-centric, or maybe American-centric for some of the more modern settings. And so just this sort of, you know, sub-Asian, Indian, Northern African, Middle Eastern area was just so nice to read about, and it was done so well. The setting also allows for all these different religious stories to take place, all these different religious characters to exist. We have Christians, we have Muslims, we have Sikhs, we have Hindus, we have all these different religions, and they play a fairly vital part in the storyline with the different characters discussing it amongst themselves and the way they interact with each other. And the actual plot is just really well done. It is a really good adventure story. It is perhaps a tiny bit long. It goes a little bit off the rails around the 3/4 mark, but by the time we get to the ending, everything I think comes together very satisfying. There's some good twists, some good reveals, all that sort of lovely, juicy stuff you love in a book. And it's just hung over this lovely world building, these fantastic characters, and yeah, just this perhaps a bit generic, you know, rescue the damsel in distress sort of storyline, but it's done very, very well. As for complaints, I don't really have a lot. I did say I loved the characters, and I do. My one complaint might be that a lot of them don't really get arcs in this storyline. Amina obviously gets an arc that she goes through, and a couple of the other characters have some minor character arcs. But a lot of the characters we're introduced to kind of just stay the same from when they're introduced to the end of the book. I think this might partly be because this is clearly intended to be a series that's going to continue. This book is complete entirely on its own, tells a full story, don't worry about that. It doesn't like end in a cliffhanger where you need to wait for part 2, but I do know another Amina Al-Sirafi book is supposedly being written. So it could just be that their arcs are coming later, but it did mean that some of the characters, while when I was introduced to them, felt wonderful and full and realistic, by the end were just a bit flat because they hadn't had that growth that like Amina and a couple of other characters did get. And secondly, the style of the book. There are these interludes that make it clear that this story is being told as Amina telling this story to a biographer. And I often struggle with this format of writing to begin with. One, it gives away some fairly major spoilers, right? Like, you know, in any moment where the character explaining things is in danger in the book, that they're actually fine because they've got to be fine to explain it to the biographer later. But it's fine because it can give you a very fun and interesting way to tell the narrative, and you can play with that. But I feel like this book just kind of doesn't. I mean, what do I mean by that? I mean, this sort of interviewer sort of scenario is fantastic for like unreliable narrators, right? Like if Amina was clearly exaggerating things, clearly not telling the truth in different points, then that's an interesting way to play with that. But I didn't get that feeling in this book. I felt like it came across as quite genuine and quite truthful. Maybe I'm misreading, maybe Amina is supposed to be an unreliable narrator, but I didn't get that. And so it felt like, with the narrative being told just kind of straight-laced, it felt like the interludes weren't serving a lot of purpose for me, and we're just kind of making a book that's already a tiny bit long, just that bit longer. Overall though, I only really bring up those complaints because that's kind of the style of the video I do, right? I do the intro, what I liked, what I didn't like, ending. So, as for a final rating, I did really like The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi. It hasn't stuck with me as like an all-time favourite forever, but I think it deserves a solid 7 out of 10. I think if you like books about pirates, or if you want to read something in a setting that is rather unique compared to a lot of the things that I've read and what you might have read, then I think you should definitely pick it up. And I think if you do pick it up, you should definitely try and pick up the cover that I have, which is this cover, because it's gorgeous. The other cover, which is on screen somewhere now, is fine. It's a perfectly good cover. Like, it's a nice cover, but it is not a cover that would have made me pick it up in the bookshop and read it without knowing anything about the book. Finally, let's bring up my bingo board again, now filled with all the squares that I've completed, dropping in The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi in that square, and we are so close to finishing now. and I can't wait to finish it and wrap it up with everybody. If anyone has any guesses as to what I'm reading for these last few squares, then drop them in the comments below. If anyone has read this book, drop it in the comments below. And if anyone has read Shannon Chakraborty's other series, which is called The City of Brass, I understand that it's kind of in the same sort of setting. How is it? Is it good? Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you want to pick up a copy for yourself, I do have an Amazon affiliate link in the description below, along with a link to my wish list. But most of all, just remember to like, comment, subscribe, and keep reading. Thanks so much.